the Sacramento Kings, the darlings of the NBA, the season before. This year, they don't make the playoffs, but their record was pretty much the same. What do we make of it? I don't know, but Michael Bolton's got some thoughts.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I was a little late getting to the show today. I've got a new job. I've been employed by the NBA to go and take back Rudy Gobert's Defensive Player of the Year awards. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free, and we are available to double bang on all platforms. Hit the thumb up, hit the subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that sort of thing. A couple of little housekeeping things. I'm joking about Rudy Gobert and the Defensive Player of the Year stuff. The conversation around Gobert is entirely ridiculous. It's insane. The way that people hate this guy is, and the way that people evaluate how he plays is just not even rooted in reality at all. Yeah, I know Nikola Jokic played well, but you know what? That's not because Gobert was bad. He was doing unbelievable defensive things, and Jokic just cooked him. Like, what do you want to do? Some of the things that Jokic was doing, it didn't matter. Well, Bam would have done it. No, would he? He wouldn't have. AD would have got him. Yeah, just like the last two playoff series. Defense is not, I'm going to get you one-on-one, let's say first to 11. That's not how defense works. Rudy Gobert is the best defender in the NBA. He's one of the best defensive players of all time. And all these talks of just, you sound like you don't know what you're on about, honestly. And it's really frustrating. Second thing is, you might be noticing if you're watching on YouTube, why is Josh wearing a collared shirt? Where's his t-shirt? Did the man leave his house for the first time? The answer is yes. I did. I did leave my house. If I had a round of applause button, I'd hit it. Trying to get my partner for our anniversary a bag from Hermes, which, as you know, is impossible. All right, I've bought stuff from Hermes before, but it's just so hard to do. So I wanted to put on a shirt. Look at me. I dress up nicely. Go in there. Hey, look at me. Can I have a bag? No, we don't have any in stock. I know you're lying. But I've got to put on a nice show. I've got to keep going into Hermes now, like every couple of days. Hey, any bags have come in by any chance? Just to show that I'm serious and dress up a bit. So if any of you work at Hermes or know anyone and want to hook me up with a bag, hit your boy up. I'm sure there's going to be so much Locked On Fantasy Basketball Hermes crossover. But if there is, I'm all ears, man. I want to buy the bag. Not a Birkin, I want a Cali. Just in case you're wondering. All right, that's a weird start to the show, but this is a weird show because it's in the off season for fantasy. Who cares? We can do. I say that as if I don't do weird things during the actual season anyway, which I do. We talk some nonsense here, and that's, I think, part of the fun. This is a hobby. It's a fun game, and having fun while we do it, I think, is a huge part of it, as also being informative and accurate. Okay, we're talking Kings. Let's get into talking about them. Let's look at their squad. Let's give a bit of an overview of the season. I went last off-season onto Matt George's Locked On Kings podcast. And he wanted a neutral take from a outside perspective of someone who may have been considered a Kings hater at times. I'm not really. I just try to be realistic in my evaluations. But, if you're not slobbing, you're considered a hater. And I got cooked in the replies on that show. I think it was post-draft where I criticized the front office for doing nothing, giving away a first-round draft pick for free, the Sabonis trade for Halliburton, the way that they just, again, bringing back Harrison Barnes and giving away draft picks, and I just was like that. I think the incredible health that they had, and De'Aaron Fox being a better rim finisher than Prime Shaq. I said, all this stuff, guys, like, it's all great, and I'm happy if you guys made the playoffs, but maybe we settle down. You're not like a new dynasty brewing here. You're not this great team who's pushing, and you wouldn't have beaten. You would. Oh, if only this happened, we would have beaten the Warriors. Would have gone all the way through. Blah blah. And I pushed back on that quite aggressively. And at least for 1 year, I think I was pretty accurate. Well, I don't know where this team goes now, but I do fear, this was my fear last year, it was my fear all the way through, that was great. There is importance in that team who never made the playoffs for 16 years, making the playoffs, but it felt a little Bullsy, Hornetsy, Wizardsy. It's like, let's get the playoffs, and that's all we care about. Do we want to build something bigger, or do we just want a first-round playoff appearance? And again, there is value in that for a team that hadn't been there. But I worry that this team is a little stuck, and what can they do to push to the next level? This was not a bad season. 46 and 36 is obviously really good. But, you got to slap him with one hand, or maybe kiss him on one cheek, slap him on the other. Is that a phrase? It should be. That's great. Plus 0.8 net rating is not... It's not the sign of a team that wins 46 games. So the year before, they were really incredibly lucky in terms of injuries, and that was a little bit of the case again this season. There was a bit of the case last season and this season. This year, their win differential versus their expected win-loss was the second highest in the NBA. So there's some luck involved in that as well. And they're probably more of a 42-43 win, or they were an expected 42.9 win team. So, they got a little bit lucky. Like, that's a neutral net rating, basically, which is almost, it's a little bit over, so it's not 41 and 41, it's 42, 43. They were 14th best offense, right in the middle of the pack. 18th best offense, pretty much the middle of the pack. Their preseason over-under had them at 44.5, so they actually went over on that. And that 44.5 was an interesting number given where they'd been the year before. I had them at 42 and 40. So actually, did I change it? Yeah, I moved on to 44 and 38 before the regular season. So I went under. I got it wrong, but I basically nailed the expected win-loss. I think in terms of evaluating the team's strength, I was right. They just got some extra luck and got a couple of wins, and that happens, and that's where you go with that stuff. In the draft, they have their own picks, probably one of the only teams that actually has just both of their own picks, pick 13 and pick 45. I wonder if Monty McNair will give one of these picks away for free. We'll find out. I don't think he'll do it for 2 years in a row, but you never know. You never know. Not much to talk about there with the draft. Again, pick 13. Someone said, Josh, on the mock draft show, you're a little bit too critical of the draft when you were talking about that the top three guys in this draft are probably 10 to 12 picks in most drafts, and that is probably a little unfair. Alex Sarr is not that bad. He is probably like a 5 to 6 ranked player in most drafts, but the rest of the top three, I don't even know who the top three is in this draft. So, is it Topic? Is it Risa Shea? Is it Holland? Is it Bazalis? Is it Klingon to some? Is it Shepard? Is it Dillingham? I honestly don't know who the top three really is. And I think in most of those cases, those guys are outside of Sarr, who I do still have a little bit higher, maybe even Holland slightly higher. I think they're more, let's say, 9 to 12. So them picking at 13, it does flatten out. So I think 13 is probably like an 18 to 19 player usually. We'll find out. And pick 45, look, that's okay. Maybe you get something, maybe you don't. Let's look at their lineups. Who was their most common starting group? It's the one that you think. De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, Keegan Murray, the Pencil Harrison Barnes. Barnesy. And of course, Domantas Sabonis. They used 7 starting lineups the entire season. That is staggering. I think the Grizzlies used 50. The Pistons used like 40. 7 is an unbelievably low number. And again, they weren't quite as safe from the injury bug as the year before, because we know that losing Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter at the end of the season, it probably did cost them a playoff spot, or at least cost them a chance of being more likely to make the playoffs, as they got rolled in the play-in. So that did hurt them. But they've been incredibly resilient in terms of injuries and lineup stability over the last 2 years. Their best lineup was really good, plus 32.1. But it doesn't include the guys you think it does. Davion Mitchell, Malik Monk, 2 bench guys. Keegan Murray, Trey Lyles, Domantas Sabonis. How very interesting is that group? Defensive presence in Mitchell, solid enough big man in Lyles with some stretchy ability. Next to Sabonis, no Barnes, no Fox, no Huerter. I'm not saying that they're better without Fox, because I don't think they are, but without Huerter and Barnes, that's an relatively easy argument to make. Free agency, there's not that much happening apart from one big thing. The restricted guys, Kessler Edwards, who I still think might be able to play, but maybe I'm just overrating him. He's always going to be a low usage guy, but I think he can defend. I think he can shoot a little bit, but I'm not sure he's got any scalability. But I would look to bring him back, but not sure they will. And then two other two-way guys, Jordan Ford, who I don't really care for that much. Jalen Slauson had ridiculous numbers coming out of college. We never really got to see any of him this season. I would still give him another go for a year, but yeah, he didn't do anything to blow us away completely. The big one is going to be on the unrestricted side where Malik Monk is unrestricted. Now, one of the reasons that I was told that the Kings made these moves to give away a first-round pick for nothing last season and to use their cap space on bringing back Harrison Barnes and re-signing and extending Domantas Sabonis was they wanted to make sure they had room to re-sign Malik Monk. And honestly, I will roast the shit out of this team if they do not re-sign Malik Monk, because they are very limited in what they can do in bringing back Monk, because they only signed him to a 2-year deal initially. There's no bird rights. There's only early bird rights. So they can only go to a level which I think is going to be exceeded by Monk's contract. Now, unless Monk prioritizes staying in Sacramento or signs like a 1+1 player option deal with low money for that first year, declines his player option, and then re-signs with bird rights to a full $25 million a year contract after that. There's some sort of deal which obviously can't be official, but they can decide that, and Monk can take the risk of the team not going back on its word. Monk is going to receive way more in free agency than the Kings can afford to pay him. So, in the end, these moves to prioritize space for Monk might not actually work, or have been a complete waste of time and resources. Alex Len and JaVale McGee are both unrestricted as well. Lyles did a lot of backup center work. Len has shown significant improvement from being a top 5 pick, 10 years ago, whatever. He didn't end up ever being that guy, but turning into a viable backup big man, sure. Like, he can be that player. We'll see whether he gets another job. He probably should at some spot. There's no one on with any player options or non-guarantees on this team. But we do have some players who will be playing on expiring deals next season. One of those is Trey Lyles, will be unrestricted. And then there's the 2 rookies who will be rookie extension eligible this offseason and then will move into restricted free agency. And that is 2 of the players that I hated the most out of that draft class, 2 of the oldest players in that draft class that were picked in the top, in the lottery, and 2 of the players that I think were picked way higher than they should have, and 2 of the players that I think are the worst in that early part of the draft, and they're both on Sacramento, and you know who they are. It's Davion Mitchell, off night, which is now used to describe every game that he plays, and Chris Duarte, who stunk. Like, he was just terrible. There's no way these guys get any sort of big rookie extension. If they do, it's the Zeke Naji, the Peyton Pritchard, 4 years, $25 million or something like that. Just to, hey, here's a contract. That'll take Chris Duarte into his 50-year-old season if he gets 4 years. The other one is Mason Jones on a 2-way, who's shown a couple of little things, but like, honestly, he's not probably going to make it into being a solid NBA rotation player. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Drive, patience, passion. I just wanted to sound different because you've heard this ad on so many different podcasts, but I'm going to say it differently. eBay Motors knows that the formula for winning championships is those 3 things in any particular order. You can chuck them whichever way you want. And eBay Motors puts those things together to keep your ride or die, or as some might call it, your car, alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle. Maybe it's not a car, maybe it's a truck, maybe it's a motorbike. Apologies for being exclusionary for vehicle types. You can level it up, the old peak performance. Level it up with roof racks. Does that give you peak performance? No, but it gives you a place to store your skis, surfboards. What else do you put on a roof rack? A tent? Probably not. But anyway, you can get roof racks, superchargers, LED headlights. Should we get snow chains? Maybe we can do that. Power, style, speed. eBay Motors has all of those things, and they've got you covered. 122 million parts for your number one ride or die over at eBay Motors. And you know that what you get is going to fit, because eBay's guaranteed fit guarantees it. It's right there in the name. Every time, the part will fit or your money back. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to US customers. Sad, sad noises. If I'm looking to keep my ride or die alive, I can't do it, unfortunately. But those of you lucky enough to do it, well, eBay Motors is going to get you. They got your back. They're there for you. All right. Let's look at the starters on this team. And there's only 5 guys because, like we said, they had 7 starting lineups and these blokes started like 50 games together, so we know who the 5 are. Let's get into them. Let's talk about them. And let's start with someone that I think is a relatively controversial player, at least in real life perspective, and that's Domantas Sabonis. You guys here in the chat or focusing or on Twitter replying, have the debate. Who's the best player on this team? Is it Sabonis? Is it Fox? We know, and we have seen this for a very long time, I think, that Sabonis can put up some interesting numbers. Sabonis can be really useful, very, very good, leads you to this sort of a team. But once you hit the postseason, there are significant limitations in what he does. He's 28, so he's bang in the middle of his prime. He played all 82 games. Again, the injury stuff didn't really impact their best players. 36 minutes a night. He was amazing in fantasy. 19 points, 12th in -1. His ADP was 15. I would suggest that he will go around that first round mark again, given that I think we're going to have a lot of question marks in the 8 to 15 range. Like, will Steph go there? Lillard, Durant, LaMelo won't. Where do you pick AD? Like, that is going to be a whack area. And I am bringing back whack. Josh, whack, vote 1. So he will go there. And I think that's fine. I think he's relatively safe. And that's not me saying, well, because he never misses a game that you should draft him. Also, just take a look at his first season in Sacramento where he missed, I think, the final 20 games of the year. 19.5 points with 13.6 rebounds. If you take him round 1, you are at a significant points disadvantage. That's significant. 8.2 assists is unbelievable. And we know there's never going to be defensive stuff. 0.9 steals, 0.6 blocks. He averaged 59 and 70 from the field and the line. Big volume free throws at low percentage is an issue. He hit 38% of his threes, but he just doesn't take any of them. His best player comps, and Sabonis is strictly a center. I know there will be sites and you'll see graphics from social accounts that go, Domantas Sabonis, Kings forward. Bro, he is not a forward. You guys need to, it's like saying DeMar DeRozan, Bulls guard. Domantas Sabonis used to be a forward 4 years ago when he played for the Pacers. If he's a forward, tell me who the Kings center is. That's what I would love to know. If you are going to put out as a media company, and I know that you are not watching Legion Hoops or whatever, whichever ridiculous Basketball Forever, whichever site it is that puts out this nonsense, ESPN maybe, you should have to put a caveat out. Kings forward Domantas Sabonis, tell me who their center is. That's beside the point. What I was trying to get to is, looking at the crafted comparisons, I did include power forwards and centers when I was comparing them because I think that some of what Sabonis does compare to the way that some power forwards do play. Of course, he doesn't play a single second of power forward, but that doesn't mean that there's no comparison there. And the number one guy, he played a lot of small ball center, and you can see it on the screen here if you're watching, that came out comparison was year 9 of Lamar Odom. Not a high scorer, a guy that passes a lot, rebounds well-rounded sort of a player. Year 9 Lamar Odom, best comp. Second was actually a center. Number 1 draft pick legend Brad Daugherty of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Who was not a bad passer himself. His advanced stuff was really, really good. Obviously, 92nd percentile, 93rd on crafted. That was EPM, the first one. CPM and 93rd. His box creation, so that is setting up for others. How much you run the offense, 91st percentile in the NBA. And I have included this box creation number for a very specific reason, which I'll talk about in a second. But 91st percentile. Sabonis, I think he's probably got 2 more years at this level. At some point, though, and this is going to sound harsh, and it's not harsh, but if this team is serious about we want to do more than be a play-in team or a first-round exit team, and we want to push for a conference final or a championships, and maybe they're not, and honestly, that is okay with how this team is and their history and all that sort of stuff. If they want to move past that, this guy has probably only got 1 to 2 more years in this sort of a role because you cannot do that. You cannot win a championship, I don't think you can be that level of a team with him being the guy creating so much stuff and being your number 1 player or number 1A, 1B, or a guy getting 36 minutes as your starting center without the correct pieces around him. Significant limitations on that. So just be aware of that. The numbers are great for fantasy if you're talking dynasty. Be aware of that real life considerations at some point will have to come into it. It will have to come into it. There was a lot of discussion on Sabonis because I do think that discussing what he does, because the numbers are great, but putting context behind them is important. Today's episode is also brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes you need that opportunity to get something off your chest. Maybe you are a Kings fan who's like, bro, why did we trade away Tyrese Halliburton? Sabonis is great and we got to the playoffs, but we can't win with him here. Or maybe you're someone who needs to get off your chest. Go, my favorite or second favorite fantasy basketball podcaster just won't stop complaining about the Kings and Sabonis. Why does he do this? Get that off your chest as someone unbiased. You can drop it in my YouTube comments if you want, but you can also talk to a therapist about it. They'll tell you, get over it. Who cares what this bloke in Australia says? But understanding how to process the information and deal with small things, big things in life is a way that therapy can be helpful. And therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us do have bigger problems than complaining about Domantas Sabonis, either on the positive or the negative side. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. All right, so that takes us into the other guy who you would consider the best player on this team, and that is De'Aaron Fox. I think Fox probably is the best player on this team, but I'm also not 100% sure. Fox is 26. He played 36 minutes a night, 74 games. He did have some injury concerns. I think it was his arm during the season, and he's had some really weird shooting things. Last season, like I said, unbelievable rim finishing numbers. Like it was better than Prime Shaq, which of course is just not something you can really trust. Now this season he was fine at the rim, but he went from 75% at the rim to 65% at the rim. It's a big drop off. His mid-ranges went from 50% to 45%. So naturally you'd think he'd be worse at fantasy. Well, not really, because he did some other things. He just said, all right, well, I'm not finishing at the rim anymore. But then he went from a 32% three-point shooter to a 37% three-point shooter. And he'd been the years before 32, 29, 32, 29, 37, 31. So there is going to be a year, I fear, where the rim numbers and mid-range numbers stay low, the three-point percentage goes back, and we get a lot of bad stuff. Or nowhere near this level. He was 16th in -1 rankings, and I was way off on him. I had him in that fourth round, late third round range, close to his ADP, which is 38. I expected the rim stuff and the mid-ranges to fall off. I was correct. I just didn't bank on him becoming an excellent three-point shooter. But it is also worth mentioning is that he shot like, I think, 43% or 42% from three for the first 2 months and then regressed like significantly because he had this injury issue, but then also did have that real big surge early in the season, and then that fell away towards the end. He shot 52 on his twos, 37 on his threes. He averaged 27 points with 3 dribbles, 4.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists. The 2 steals is key as well. And that's another slight red flag. His steal percentage had been 1.6% each of the last 2 seasons, and it went to 2.7. And we know what happens. You lead the league in steals, or you get 2 steals a game, you can still be really good and get 1.4 the next season, and you've lopped 30 spots off your ranking. So there are some really big red flags. The best comps for him were unbelievable, actually. Tracy McGrady, year 10, and Allen Iverson, year 6. And I did include some shooting guards here, even though Fox is nominally a point guard, but he's also not because of Sabonis being there. It's a little bit like his Jamal Murray a point guard, like sort of, but also not. His advanced metrics were huge. 96th percentile EPM, 95th in crafted. And why I said I wanted to put Sabonis' box creation there is to compare and contrast it to Fox. Fox does more. 95th percentile versus 91st for Sabonis. And I think most people would say Sabonis is the hub. He sets up the offense. He runs everything. And you know the assist numbers for Sabonis are way higher. But in terms of actual creation for teammates and running the offense, Fox graded out higher. He did more. And that was very intriguing to me. Now, some of that, maybe he's not as good of a passer, so a lot of the stuff that he's trying to create doesn't work. Is it that his teammates aren't hitting the shots? Is it that Sabonis is getting assists on no-fail type plays that are boosting those numbers? I'm not sure which one of those it is. But it was, I thought, really interesting to show and compare those two together there. Now we get from those 2 players, first or second round guys, to whatever it is the rest of this team offers. And let's talk Keegan Murray. He's going to be 24 next season, younger than Dalton Connect. Someone said, stop making jokes about Dalton Connect. I'll get my jokes off, mate. I'll continue to do it. I'll joke about Keegan Murray being old. He's played 2 years in the NBA. Dalton Connect's still older than him. 23.7 is his age currently, Keegan. He played 77 games in 34 minutes. There was a lot of talk about Keegan being awesome and taking these big steps forward, and he did improve for sure. But there are still a lot of concerning things here. The one thing I will say with Murray is that he has shown an ability that when needed, things can ramp. But consistency is still a massive problem. He was 95th in -1 rankings, 100th in points leagues. Do not base anything off the Yahoo rank that tells you he was 38th. That is absolute insanity. Like a nonsense number that will lead you massively astray. 30, come on, bro. 38th. Pretty sure they had Giannis 34th. Those two are pretty comparable, yeah? 15 points, 2.5 threes, 5.5 boards, 1.7 assists, 1 steal, and 0.8 blocks. He did improve his defense a lot. They're not great numbers. They're not terrible numbers. 45 from the field and 83 from the line. Doesn't turn it over. Doesn't assist either. 56 on 2s and 36 on 3s. So he did lose a lot of the 3-point shooting percentage from last season, but the volume went up. And he did take some nice steps forward. He was 86th percentile EPM and 82nd in CPM. They're really strong. It does help when a lot of the other guys on this team are just honestly garbage, and that does boost some of those numbers. But some of my concerns with him is usage, it's consistency, it's the 3-point shot falling away, it's the complete lack of passing. And when you look at the 2 best comps for him for this season, year 2 of Cameron Johnson, passing legend, and year 10 of Jeff Green, another guy that's not known as a ball mover. And they're like fine. They're good NBA players. They're solid enough. But I still don't see star upside with Keegan. Again, when Sabonis or Fox has been out, Keegan has stepped up a lot. And he gets a lot of attention for his great games. You'll all remember he hit that game where he hit 11 threes in a row or something. Everyone was getting it out. The old Dutch Rudder 1000 came out. It was all over the shop. And about 3 games later, I think he went like 10 points on 20% shooting. Complete zipped mouth. No one talks about it. And you feel like a dickhead talking about it. But you have to. Because in the end, he ends up 95th in fantasy, averaging 15 points on 45% shooting. Like, is that mid? It's pretty mid. This is what needs to get better. 20th percentile free throw rate. One of my criticisms of Murray as a rookie was, well, how do we get better? He was the 6th usage player on this team. And he did step it up. He had to get ahead of Huerter, Barnes, and Monk. He was able to get ahead of some of those. And Monk might be gone next season. So maybe he established himself as a 25 usage player. I'm not convinced that he does. What was his usage this season? Look, still 18. That's still really low. Can a team survive with him as the 3rd best player taking 24% usage? I'm not certain that leads to great. It might. I'm not certain. Free throw rate 20th percentile. He just needs the ball more. He needs to do more offensively. Defense massively improved. There's no question about that. But it's about the other stuff. Consistency and doing more when you've got the ball. I do think that we will get a significant improvement, especially if Fox leaves. But at the moment, he is still hampered by being 3rd banana, and the defensive improvements don't necessarily translate to the stat sheet. Let's talk about Vanderpants Kevin Huerter, who suffered that shoulder injury, which cost him the rest of the season. People were drafting him. 129 ADP, 92%. Now, this is one where I said, what is the point? Why would you bother with this? There is no upside in it. He's going to be subject to Mike Brown's whims. You miss 2 shots, you don't play. You hit 6 in a row, you play 30 minutes. You have a hot streak for 3 games, it disappears. This is what happens with Huerter every time. No point drafting him. Get on early to a hot streak and then move off after that. He's still only 25. He played 64 games in 24 minutes before he got hurt, but like 24 minutes as a starter. And he got benched at times as well. Didn't start some games and went back in later on. 199th in -1, 182 in points, averaged 10 points with 2 threes, 3.5 boards, 2.5 rebounds, 44 and 77, no defensive stats, shot 36 from 3. But honestly, when your role is white guy shooter, you need to hit 40% of them. He can do a little bit with his passing sometimes, but with Fox and Sabonis, that you don't need to do that much, and Monk, he just doesn't need to do it. His comps were year 7 of Nico Batum and year 2 of Chandler Parsons. Remember that? Remember Chandler Parsons? I don't listen to anything he says now, but yeah, he was good for a period. 63rd percentile EPM. Crafted liked him a lot more, 79th percentile, and his passer rating was actually 74th. He can do more there. But I think overall the defensive issues, the shooting inconsistencies, mean that you're not going to be banking on Huerter to ever be a 30-minute-a-night player. I think the common comp often would be Grayson Allen and Dante Vincenzo. Not really sure that that's quite right, but that's the common comparison we get. But he's clearly behind those two guys at the moment. And I'm not really sure that he gets back to doing it. But honestly, again, you look at the team, do they start a Keon Ellis next season for more defensive flexibility? Is Huerter's shooting more valuable to them in a bench role if Monk's not there? I think that's possible too. All I know is I have no interest in him in fantasy, and I'm not really sure I ever will again. Let's talk about one of the worst fantasy players of our recent memory, and that is the pencil Harrison Barnes. Barnesy. I'm not going to do the sound again because he doesn't deserve it. He's 32. He played all 82 games. Bravo, my guy. 29 minutes a game. 124th on Yahoo ranks. Yeah, definitely a draftable player. 211th in points. He was drafted 143rd, and if there was someone I was avoiding more than Kevin Huerter, it was Harrison Barnes because he just does nothing. Yes, he had that, 3-game stretch in the middle of the season where he averaged 28 points a game, but we know what this is. 12 points, 3 rebounds, 0.7 steals, 1 assist, and I've never seen someone more allergic to blocking shots in my life. The worst, is it? This is a guess, per inch. And if we're grading things per inch, maybe I want to sit this one out. But if we're talking blocks per inch of height, he's got to be like one of the worst in NBA history. The man just never does it. 57 on his twos, 39 on his threes, 80 from the line, 0.7 turnovers, but never passes. He's just uninvolved. And this is what they prioritize in their offseason, bringing this guy back. Trading away draft picks for nothing because they wanted Barnes back. The writing has been on the wall for Barnes for 2 years. And with the way that they're, would they pick someone at 13 who takes his spot? Would Trey Lyles can start over him? I don't know any of those answers. I think we might be in for another, even worse season from Harrison Barnes. The best comps for him were Maurice Evans in year 6 and Richard Jefferson in year 11. 51st percentile on EPM and 38th on Crafted. And this is why, he's playing power forward most of the time. You can debate whether it's him or Keegan, whatever. 16th percentile in contesting shots at the rim. He has no interest in it. It's not even that he's bad at it. He is. He just never does it. Ever. And when you're a team that is playing Domantas Sabonis at center, you'd want somebody to protect the rim. Somebody. And that's why I think it's a horrendous fit. And that holds them back. But we'll see if they're able to get out of it at all. So that's the starters. 3 interesting players, 2 not very good players. And then we get into talking about the bench guys. And we have to start with Malik Monk because he should have won 6th man of the year, I think. I think I had him or Bogdan. I can't remember who I had number 1, but they were 1 and 2. He is going to get a decent contract. I would say that it's less than 50% chance he's back in Sacramento. It frustrates me that no matter what, they just wouldn't start him or wouldn't play him 34 minutes a night when he was clearly, I would say, clearly their 3rd best player. I think he was better than Keegan. Maybe you can debate that. That's okay. 114th in -1, 109th in points. His ADP was 146. People didn't really believe in Monk, and I get that. That's understandable because we just didn't know where the minutes would be. 15 points, 2 threes, 5 assists. He's going to be bad defensively. Shot 35 on his threes, 53 on his twos, but 15 and 5 in 26 minutes with over 2 threes. Put him in a larger role. You are talking a top 75 player. It might be one of those scenarios where it lasts for 2 years from here on out, but this is prime peak Monk coming up. His best comps, unbelievably, were year 6 of D'Angelo Russell and year 7 of D'Angelo Russell. And I believe they were the 2 full years that Russell played in Minnesota. So that's a little bit interesting. They're not that dissimilar. Not going to generate defensive stats, okay assist numbers, bad rebounder, good scoring, good threes. Hits his free throws most of the time. Bad defender, good self-creator. All that sort of makes sense. But we know that when Russell plays 32, 33 minutes, he can be a top 70 fantasy guy, and I think Monk can do that. 76. Why did I make that number up? 62nd percentile EPM, 52nd on CPM. What was intriguing, his offensive load what he was doing in terms of shots and creating for others, 94th percentile. He carried a lot. And that's where I wanted to include that not only for Monk, to say, look, he's doing a lot. And if he gets a larger 33-minute-a-night role, it's great. He might not have that same role on a different team, but it would be close. But if he leaves, somebody needs to do something offensively. There's only so much more that Sabonis and Fox can do. And that is probably where the Keegan Murray improvement comes from. Because as much as you might think I shit on Keegan a lot, he has shown the signs that when other players are out and he has to step up, he can. He's just inconsistent. He doesn't maintain it when others are back. But it might be a case that losing Monk and all of Monk's load, giggity, means that Keegan has to step up more consistently. And while he hasn't been someone to necessarily take it, Keegan, he might be just forced down his throat. Like that hamster in the banana, where he has to do it. Let's talk about the guy who did start the second half of the season, Keon, Ellis, on a two-way contract, outplayed Davion Mitchell early in the season, started some games at point guard and then ended up starting at shooting guard down the stretch and provided really good defense. He's 24. He played 17 minutes a night. He averaged 5 points with 1 3, with 0.9 steals and 0.5 blocks, but that's in 17 minutes. Let's go 34 minutes, starters minutes, 1.8 steals and 1 block. As a 6'4" guard. It's pretty good. 244th in -1 rankings. He shot 42 on his threes. Now we saw him as a starter, that if you were going to grab him at the end of the season, you just had to grab and you had to take the totality of what he brought. Because on a game-by-game basis, with Mike Brown and the way he runs his rotations, you never knew what you would get. You might get 17 minutes with 2 points. You might get 35 minutes with 20 points and 4 steals and 4 blocks. And you add it all up together and it turned out to be a back-end sort of a player. But if you're expecting good numbers every game, he just didn't bring that. And some of that is just where he sits, but it's also a very consistent pattern on this team. We've seen it with Keegan. We've seen it with Kevin Huerter. We've seen it with Monk to a lesser extent. And we're going to see it with Ellis. This is what Mike Brown does. Mike Brown does not believe in whatever the rule is. I don't know what the rule is here. There's probably some sort of economics or maths or science rule about it. About, like, Brown's is like, you just did this, that means you do it the rest of the day. Not like, maybe you can get better. He doesn't believe in that. And that's okay. That's his philosophy. But his is like, you hit all your shots, so therefore you hit everything else the rest of the day. You missed all your shots, you'll never make one ever again. That's his philosophy. Whatever. But we have to bake that in. We have seen it in action for years. Unless you are a superstar All-NBA player, he'll just cut you down. You're finished. The best comps for him, these are no surprise really. Javon Carter, elite defensive player with some three-point shooting ability. And John Concha. Yeah! Lil John is one of those guys who can do a bunch of different stuff but doesn't score well. We've seen both of these guys, Carter and Concha, have 12-team value at times, much like Ellis. I think there is a chance that Ellis is a starter next season, but again, I don't think we'd be drafting him. We'd just be looking sort of on the outside, streaming in when necessary. 80th percentile EPM is very eye-opening. 83rd in crafted is also eye-opening. His deflections, 96th percentile, is also eye-opening. All of that impact metric stuff is one of those things that doesn't always translate year on year. But when we've got some good fantasy numbers like the defense, some good shooting numbers, plus the impact is good, maybe they do feel a little bit more comfortable saying he is our guy, and then we just got to get over the Mike Brown whims. Trey Lyles. When Trey Lyles played in Detroit, honestly, not sure there was a worse NBA player going around. Maybe that was Detroit. Obviously, James Wiseman existed, so maybe that was harsh for me to say about Trey Lyles. He went to Sacramento, and he changed a lot. He became much better defensively. His shot went in. He wasn't trying to do whatever it was he was trying to do in Detroit. Is that coaching? Probably. Lyles, at plenty of times down the stretch, was taking minutes off Harrison Barnes. They'd start Barnes and he played 20 minutes, and Lyles would play 28. Had a knee injury towards the end of the year, came back from it. He's 28 now. He's going to be unrestricted next season. 20 minutes a night only, 297th -1. He averaged 7 points with 4 rebounds in those 20 minutes. Defensive stats, he's never seen them before. 0.3 steals and 0.3 blocks. Shooting 45 and 70 from the line, which as a power forward, that's pretty bad. He hit 38% of his threes, though, and he just takes basically all threes. Because you look, he goes, well, he's 58 on twos and 38 on threes. Why is his field goal so bad? Well, every shot is a three. And again, when you're playing with Len or Sabonis, you need somebody who's going to space. And he does that really well. And he'll take those shots. The best comps for him, Rafe LaFrance, year 8. And then tackle box, John Lua, year 6. Remember John Lua? Pistons legend, Bucks legend? And it makes a little bit of sense with their games. 55th percentile EPM, 65th in crafted. What I did find interesting was his defensive rebounding quality metric, not just how many rebounds you get, but your ability as a rebounder. 84th percentile. And that sort of tracks 4.5 boards per 20 minutes, but it's about him just being a very good rebounder. It's hard to get good rebounds and playing with Sabonis, and I wouldn't think that there's any chance that Lyles starts over Barnes, but I wouldn't rule it out. Wouldn't draft him in fantasy, but wouldn't rule that out. Sasha Vezenkov came across. Another one of the things that the Kings fans went off at me about was when I said the team just didn't improve and showed no real gumption in making the team better. That we brought over the EuroLeague MVP. Yeah, you did. Sasha Vezenkov played 12 minutes a game in 42 games. He's 29. He's 365th ranked player. He was drafted in 3% of the leagues for some reason at 141. I don't know why that was. He averaged 5 points with a 3 a game, half an assist, half a steal. He shot 44 from the field, 80 from the line, 55 on 2s and 38 on 3s. And I will say this, a lot of Europeans come across who are really strong players, really good shooters, and they struggle in their first year. Vezenkov struggled a little bit, but I wouldn't say he struggled necessarily with shooting. I would not be shocked if Vezenkov hits like 42% of his triples next season. I wouldn't be shocked if we know Barnes should be on shaky ground. Does the spacing of Vezenkov give him an opportunity to start next to Murray? I don't think he'd be fantasy relevant, but why couldn't he? I'm trying. There's a player that's in my head. It's not Davis Bertans because that's too easy. White guy, red hair, beard. It's too easy. But there's no reason that if we saw him into a larger role, I was going to say, well, why don't I just look at the comps as to who the player is? That he couldn't be useful because the comps are year 8 of Ersan Ilyasova. Remember that? He was a fantasy legend at one point. And then year 8 of Tony Warren. Now, Tony Warren, TJ Warren, that's the season that he was in between Brooklyn and Phoenix and he was absolutely trash. So that's a little bit of a worry. This is not elite Tony Warren. This is like before the injuries completely killed his career. 45th percentile EPM, 39th in CPM. Shot quality as a shooter, 66th percentile, which again, first year player, 28, coming over from Europe. They nearly always suck first year across. And year 2, they nearly always get better. I could see some really big... If he plays only 12 minutes a game next season for Vezenkov, then he's done. He'll go back to Europe. I would think that they would be hoping that they can get 20 plus out of him, and maybe he is in the mix to be a starter. But I'm not convinced of that. Defensive stuff is a problem. He had a bad ankle sprain that cost him a lot of time as well. The last one we do have to talk about is one of their lottery pick guards, the one that they actually selected, and that's Davion Mitchell. I'm not going to talk about Chris Duarte. He had many chances this season, and again, showed that he was a terrible pick from the Pacers and a bad trade from the Kings. Davion Mitchell was also a bad pick from the Kings inside the top 10 as a 5'2" guard who can't shoot. He's 26, 72 games, played 15 minutes, was overtaken by Keon Ellis. He was the 421st ranked player this season in fantasy, despite playing 15 minutes a night. That 15 minutes is not nothing. 5.3 points, 0.8 threes, 1.9 assists. Convert that to 30 minutes, you're talking 3.8 assists. You're a point guard, mate. And what about off night, defensive legend? 0.2 steals. Oh, well, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. 30 minutes. What's that? 0.4. Oh, okay. That's like Bojan Bogdanovic level. That's horrific. Well, what is this? Now, in the past, he's been better at generating steals, but that's horrible. He shot 36 on his threes, which I'll give him credit for. That's an improvement from where he's been in the past, but he's too small. He's not a volume shooter. He's not reliable as a shooter. I don't know what happened to the defense. He was terrible. His best comps, Randy Whitman, rookie year, and year 7 of Austin Rivers. He was 25th percentile EPM. He was 15th in CPM. And probably the most damning thing here is for being off night, the guy that can get by with his defense. 15th percentile in deflections. You got to do more than that. So when your one calling card is defense, generating defensive events, turnovers, and you don't do it, then what are we doing here? He's 26. He will be 26 start of the season. He's done nothing for me to suggest there's some big breakout coming. He's had opportunities when Fox missed time and never really delivered on it. And I am just 100% out on Davion Mitchell really ever becoming, honestly, even a solid rotation player. I know he's only 3 years in, and my priors are a part of this because I hated the draft pick. I think I had him 18 or 19 in that draft. I hated him getting picked there. But nothing I've seen changes my mind there. And that is the end of talking about the Sacramento Kings for this season. So, Kings fans, basketball fans, am I unfair? Am I unfair about Sabonis? Am I unfair about maybe regression from Fox? My characterization of Barnes? What you think the Kings did in the off-season? Is there any of that unfair? Maybe it is. I'm not sure. Let me know. Also, hit thumb up and subscribe, and any other comments you got, drop them below. Tell me about all of your good Hermes stories and how sexy it is when I wear a collar. All that's good. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.